What's up, everybody? This is Ruben here. This is another podcast, right? 30 podcasts, a podcast every single day. This one is going to be in video format. It's going to be posted on YouTube, which is kind of ironic. I'm saying this because you're already on YouTube if you're watching this in video format. I'm going to chop it up in pieces. I'm going to talk in segments, try to format this like a real show, right? So that's kind of what the aim is behind this. But it will be in podcast form. I will extract the audio from this and I will put it on all the platforms, right? So it's going to be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it, it's going to be on it, right? And so you're going to have it in all those places you can watch it and check it out, right? So this particular one's going to be in video format, and it will be available everywhere else too. So nobody's going to be limited, right? It's just the video component. I'm just recording it on my phone here, right? So anyways, so I'm going to jump right into it. The first segment rather, or the first like kind of topic I want to jump into is mixed martial arts, the UFC, right? What is happening with the UFC? So there's a couple of things. It's kind of the only really show in town right now, right? Now the NBA and basketball and baseball, Major League Baseball, they're going to try to reopen up. They're going to try to get themselves going. Let's hope we don't have any setbacks with that and it proceeds forward and we get some entertainment, right? I could talk about sports again. It's been really difficult talking about sports because there's very, very, very few topics and everybody kind of clings to those and everybody does videos about them. So anyways, the little difference with this whole thing here, so the UFC 251, you have a Gilbert Burns versus Kamaru Usman. That's the headliner, and the co-headliner is going to be Volkanovski, which is the current champion of 145, versus Max Holloway, who he dethroned and beat him, right? That first fight went the distance. But what's interesting about UFC 251, and the reason why I even bring this up in the video, and I'm going to talk, and you know, we're going to go a little bit for this and talk about where it's this idea that the reason why you don't see a ton of big names, you don't see the big hitters, right? Like you see, like, okay, Max Holloway is an A-class level fighter. He's amazing, but he's not, for some reason, he's not on that extra top echelon. He's not on the home run hitter level, right? He's a very entertaining fighter. I love Max Holloway. All these fighters I'll either criticize or talk about. Ultimately, I have a lot of respect for them because of the fact that they fight in the octagon. They get punched in the face for a living, right? So, and I'm just talking about it, right? So who am I? So that little disclaimer being said, moving forward, let's talk about, where's Conor McGregor? Conor McGregor wanted to fight on this July card. He knew there was money because this weird deal, there's investors investing in this money because of the location, right? In, Saudi Arabia, right? At Yas Island, right? So Yas Island came up with this idea. It's almost like a movie type of deal where they're going to fight on an island in an outdoor arena. They had a special octagon made. It's not a special octagon, but it's an octagon in a weird location that they've never fought in. And Dana White and company and the UFC, they came up with this concept. They said, let's do it. They found investors, so they're going to get all this money, but they didn't want to pass that on to the big name fighters, right? The John Jones, DC. Who else? You got John Jones, DC, Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal. You have a bunch of big names that were kind of locked out of this, and they were very upset, right? That's where and I'm going to segment to the second part of my story on the UFC, and that's the reason why I even bring all this up, because they're connected, right? So this UFC Yas Island, so now, it's come out. I think Brendan Schaub says that the UFC, the fighters pay is essentially 18% of what their total revenue is. And so if you look at, so that's like a disturbing number in it's not disturbing, but it's a disproportionate amount of the money's going, is just staying in the corporation, right? It's their choice, right? It's their organization. But then you look at the NFL, the NBA, they basically share with the ownership shares with the players, essentially 50%. So that's a huge difference, right? That's double. If the fighters were getting 50% of the revenue from the UFC, if this is true, right? Because the UFC doesn't release their numbers. It's not like in baseball where they have unions and they have to disclose all this and there's collective bargaining agreements. In the UFC, it's a little bit different because they're not the only show in town, but they are the biggest show in town, and they have the biggest clout. They have the most fighters under contract. They have the most, arguably the best fighters in the world, right? So let's just talk about that, right? So let's say, okay, so you have that. And so these big name fighters, they want a bigger piece of the pie. This is a natural progression of any kind of sports, right? There's nothing unusual about this situation. And when we look at that and we say to yourself, Ruben, this is not unusual. No, it's not unusual for the fighters to realize that their potential, they're the show, right? If there's no fighters, there's no organization. At the same token, the organization has helped a lot of these fighters grow and become legit sports entertainment athletes, right? They have put them in the situation, anywhere from, Donald Cerrone, his deal with Budweiser, where he was getting sponsored by them. That was a long-standing deal. Cowboy Cerrone has made a lot of money in his life, and would he have made the same money if he would have been in another organization? We don't know, right? That's a matter of opinion, right? That's a matter of opinion. And, we can argue either way. So who needs who more, right? So ultimately, if there are no compelling fights, if there are no interesting characters, if there are no John Jones, no Conor McGregors, no Nate Diaz, where would this sport actually be at this moment? Right? So that's kind of the question, right? Like, where would the sport be, right? Where would the sport be if you didn't have these outrageous, polarizing characters that are help progress the sport to the next level? So if you keep going to the next level, you're in a position now where, the UFC has a giant deal with ESPN worth millions and millions of dollars. They changed their business model. They're going away from the pay-per-view model. So that's changing in itself, right? And so you look at what they've transitioned to, and it's this high profit margin thing. And a lot of the fighters are obviously feeling a level of frustration, right? They want a bigger piece of the pie, rightfully so, right? That's gonna be always the battle this is always gonna be a battle, right? This is always gonna be a battle, and this is always gonna be something that the UFC is always gonna have to fight with, okay? The UFC is always gonna have to deal with this, and they're always gonna have to be put in a position where they're quote unquote the bad guy, but in reality they're not, right? They're one of the premier organizations. They have the best testing of all the mixed martial arts companies. And so their strength is the fact that they have all this marketing power, and they could literally make you a star, right? So Conor McGregor was a good example of this, right? Like, you look, and I think I've talked about this before, where it's like you look at the contrast between what Conor McGregor was able to do and what John Jones was able to do, right? So they both got promoted by the organization. They were both catapulted to stardom. They were both very talented. John Jones essentially is undefeated in his career as a mixed martial artist, in his professional career. And has he made the same amount of money that Conor McGregor has? A lot of people would say no, right? Even though John Jones has been fighting a lot longer, and his longevity in the sport is evident, right? He's still capable of fighting. A lot of people say that he lost a bunch of deals because of him, right? Because of what he did and his actions. There's a lot to be said to that, right? At one point, he was the only athlete sponsored by Nike. I mean, he was the first mixed martial artist sponsored by Nike, and he wore a pair of Nike shorts, in a fight. And then immediately after that, a whole bunch of crazy stuff happened in his personal life, and he lost his sponsorship, right? He lost his belt, he gets it back, he loses it because of personal reasons, and he gets it back. He just keeps going with this cycle, right? It just never ends, right? So, that being said, we talk about the whole money aspect because of the fact that now a lot of these fighters, John Jones in particular, Jorge Masvidal, you go down the list of the people saying that they want to get paid. They want to get paid more. And so then the question is there more money? Right? So then if this number is true, that only 18% of the profits are going to the fighters, then the answer is an outstandingly yes, there's more money to be spread around. Right? The question is, will they part with that money? And obviously that's going to be a fight. They're not just going to give up 20% or 30% to get to that 50%, that 50-50 mark that the other two premier professional sports give up. And that had to be a fight too. What people don't understand is it's years and years and years of these negotiations that get you to that 50% mark, that half and half, right? Where the talent, in baseball, you have a lot of players and a lot of games. It's a little bit harder to be kind of greedy about that, I should say, right? And so the unions are a lot stronger in baseball. Basketball, you have one or two players can have a giant impact on the kind of Q rating of the NBA. When I say Q rating, it's the appealability of that sport, right? How entertaining is it and how appealing is it for people to watch? So there's that kind of function of that, right? So a lot of these players are holding out. A lot of these players are putting themselves on the shelves. They're putting themselves on ice because of the way the UFC contracts are working. They're not guaranteed, right? It's obviously favored to the UFC because the nature of fighting is a little bit different than all these other sports, right? There's medical concerns off of every match. There's medical concerns in baseball and basketball, but it's a little bit different, right? You're dealing with somebody that can get killed here, right? And of course, in other sports you can, but it's very rare that you die in basketball and baseball and so forth, right? So John Jones says he's willing to hold out 2 or 3 years. Is that enough? If every single marquee fighter holds out for 2 to 3 years. Now, here's the question. Does it get to the point where the UFC's ratings are dropping so low that they have no choice? That's what's interesting, right? Are they trying to call the UFC's bluff? Are they trying to put them in a position where they cannot, where they, are they going to put themselves in a position where it is going to be difficult for them to recover, right? Ratings, they have to put a lot of shows on. And if all these shows are not being headlined by the people that we know and come to love and come to admire and follow, then how far do the ratings have to dip before the UFC caves into their demands, right? They do have a little bit of leverage here, right? All these marquee fighters are kind of holding out for bigger pay, right? You have Stylebender, who's a very entertaining fighter. You have Sugar Shane O'Malley, who is Sean O'Malley, which is like the next rising star, right? What if he doesn't fight? What if all these guys just don't fight? What happens to UFC? Well, it's going to keep going. We know for a fact that they're just going to keep on trucking along, right? They're going to keep on putting themselves in a position. They're going to put the fights on still. The fights are not going to stop for anybody, right? So, with that being said, though, if the fights don't stop for anybody, what's going to happen now that the entertainment value is going to dip, right? We like to see the storylines, right? Sports entertainment is very compelling because of the storylines behind the whole thing. Conor McGregor being on welfare, John Jones being this tremendous star that can't get out of his own way. Jorge Masvidal, who was this journeyman fighter for many, many years, and now he's risen to stardom because he's finally reaching his own. He's at the peak, but he doesn't have a big window, right? You have Dominic Cruz, you have Henry Cejudo, which is what the champ, and he retired, right? Henry Cejudo, basically beat the unbeatable fighters in his division and revitalized the division. He retired. You have a lot of people in the UFC right now that are kind of holding out, and it's almost like it's an organized thing. So, that being said, it's interesting to see who's going to break their holdout of the big names, right? And that's going to be a compelling story because everybody wants to hear the story behind that of, who did that, right? So, the next biggest name that I could think of is the Stipe DC fight, the 4th fight, and I have a feeling that Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title again, I have a feeling that they got paid a hefty sum, and that's what I think is also upsetting to these other fighters, that they picked Daniel Cormier because he's a company guy, right? That's just the way it works, right? Very talented fighter. That's going to be a very interesting fight. However, everybody's mad because they didn't get paid. So anyways, that's kind of the wrap on that. The next thing I kind of want to talk about, right, is this whole thing about the NFL season, right? I think looking at the NFL and looking at what's happening with the whole COVID thing, I think that we're in a position where there's going to be so much uncertainty with football I think football is not going to really happen this year. If everything goes perfectly with basketball, and if everything goes perfectly with baseball, then I can see them having a season. But here's the issue. Here's the issue that I think is going to happen. It's not going to be this year. It's going to be in the future because I don't think there's going to be any college football. That I don't think is going to happen. I think college football, even though they make a ton of money, I think there's going to be so much risk that I think people are just not going to be willing to take that. So the risk for college football, and what I think is going to happen is in the next couple of years, we're going to see the effect of it. It won't be the end of this year. This year, the draft, the effects of this year is going to be a draft where a lot of players are busts. You're going to have a lot of surprises and a lot of busts because you didn't have the normal flow of the offseason in preparation for the NFL draft. I'm not saying that everybody, did it. I'm not saying they made bad decisions. I'm just saying you're going to see the frequency of players that don't pan out, that are high draft picks, is going to be a little bit higher, right? Which tells me, by virtue of this uncertainty and this inconsistency, that it will be virtually impossible to dictate who's going to win the Super Bowl this year. If they even have a season, the Super Bowl prediction is going to be virtually impossible to even get close. Somebody's going to win a Super Bowl this year coming up if they have a season that we did not expect. It could be the Los Angeles Rams. It can be the Baltimore Ravens. It could be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It could be the New England Patriots. I mean, holy smokes, they got Cam Newton. What's going to happen? And here's the New England Patriots have reloaded with the perfect player, right? This guy is a veteran. He's going to be hungry because he probably signed for a little bit of dough. He's very accomplished. This guy is as good as they get that hasn't won a Super Bowl. Because there's a lot of good quarterbacks out there that have never won a Super Bowl. So we don't want to necessarily think that that's a flaw, right? I mean, you have somebody that's outrageous like Patrick Mahomes. He was destined to win one because he was partnered up with Andy Reid, which is a very capable coach. So we have a Cam Newton in a Bill Belichick system. I think there's going to be an outrageous statistical outburst that Cam Newton's going to have. I think the Patriots are going to win. If they have a full 16 games, they're going to win 80 to 90% of their games. I would suspect that they're only going to drop 1 or 2 games. If they have a 16-game season, I can see them going 14-2 because of the fact that the coaching system, the player system that they have in New England is so good. Now you have this giant quarterback who has a command presence, who's been the face of a franchise for many years. Number 1 draft pick. This guy's amazing. Cam Newton is amazing. He's constantly evolving. He's just, he's a character, a personality. He can carry a team. He can deal with criticism. People can have all these negative thoughts about him. He's a very capable and admirable quarterback to be in part and be the front of that organization. And he's going to give that organization some grit. He's hungry. Tom Brady's 6-time Super Bowl winner. Right? 6 times. What else has he got to prove? MVP after MVP. I mean, this guy is amazing. Tom Brady, arguably he's the GOAT of all time. The greatest football player of all time. It's hard to argue. He's surfacing as that guy. He's going to have all the records, all the rings. I mean, you got to have a storied career to be able to beat that guy. Maybe Patrick Mahomes, if he plays 20 years, he can surpass, if he plays that well, his whole career. And that's hard to do, right? Because it's the system, right? Andy Reid is not going to coach there for 20 years. Andy Reid has 5 or 10 more years, and that's it at best, right? If they get hot on the run. Andy Reid, I think he's like 60-something, so he'd have to be 85 years old. That's not going to happen, right? I could see that happening in the Los Angeles Rams with Jared Goff because their coach is a young man, right? So they could just keep going with that, right? You could be there for 20 years if it happens. Although coaches, it's hard for them to do that anymore. But anyways, I digress. I get to talking about the season. I don't think the season's going to happen, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult to predict a winner, a Super Bowl winner. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? We don't know that, right? We don't know because there's so many anomalies. There's so many differences. There's so many kind of variables. What's going on? if every state, what happens if they consolidate the games and they have to play in non-home field? What if all these teams have to play in a safe zone where they're allowing fans and people can go? And, all that adjustment has to happen. Now, everybody will have to adjust. You say to yourself, Ruben, but if every team has to adjust, then it's not going to matter. That's where you're wrong, okay? If every team has to adjust, everybody deals with adversity differently, okay? The adversity, it's going to be dealt with in a different way. Why does this thing always fight me, dude? This bracket, I'm going to buy me a professional cell phone holder bracket for my car one day. One of those movie ones where that thing doesn't move at all. It's like glued on there, but it's like with magnets. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. But anyways, getting back to football here, right? So we have this position that the football, we're going to assume that it's going to go on, right? Everybody's assuming, right? But it's starting to creep up. We're in July now, right? College football is going to kick off at the end of August. We're literally 2 months away from football, right? There has to be training camp. In college football, kids have to get back to class. They have to get back on campus, right? And we just had this recent kind of upsurge in cases and all this other stuff. And, that's going to slow down the process of letting everything reopen and letting the players in college football come back on campus and resume preparation, what they normally do, right? So the reason why I bring up college football is because that's going to have an adverse effect in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Because if you skip a round of draft picks, if they don't have any football, you're going to skip around of player development, right? And it's going to retard for 1 year, right? So basically you're going to pull everything back for 1 year, and you're going to have this kind of diluted pool of players that are going to play, because if they didn't play, they're not proven, so forth and so on. So what's going to happen, because the NFL's average life expectancy of an NFL player is like 3 years. So they rely on the young people, unrestricted free agents. So the more uncertainty that you have, the less consistent, less predictable. So what's amazing about football is you could possibly see in the next couple of years some outrageous statistics destroyed. I have a feeling this is going to be the year of the running back. I have a feeling the defenses aren't going to be that good, and a good running offense is going to blow everybody away. And I feel that's why the New England Patriots picked up Cam Newton, because the option quarterback, right, the versatile quarterback, the Patrick Mahomes who won a Super Bowl, is now the playbook for how we win. Now, defenses will eventually catch up, and they will scheme, and they will practice, and they will learn, they will adapt. People are so intelligent when they learn how to prepare these defenses, right? However, I think the running mobile quarterback, and Cam Newton's a little bit different, right? Because he's a spicy veteran. He's a spicy, wily veteran. I mean, the Cleveland Browns could win a Super Bowl this year. There's so much variability in what's going on. Everything's up in the air. There's no consistency. Everything is kind of thrown at the wind. I would be surprised if a team that didn't make the playoffs last year wins a Super Bowl. I think, we could start seeing a lot of injuries. There's a whole thing. Whenever you don't have a regular flow of what goes on with the NFL, and whenever you have these anomalies, holdouts, lockouts, you have all these things that people wait. It's like everything kind of skyrockets in terms of injuries and all this other stuff that goes on, right? So you start seeing all this stuff express itself, and people say, well, that's not going to happen. We're definitely not going to see the polished NFL that we see, right, when we see it coming up. People say, well, that's not true, Ruben. Okay, we'll see. The NBA is not going to be what we're used to seeing, right? The players are going to be isolated. They're going to be in this, what they call the bubble, right? Are they going to do that to the NFL teams? You know how much money that's going to cost the NFL to isolate 53 players and staff? And what happens, here's the thing, okay? In the NFL, you have a lot of older coaches that the level of fear is going to go up because of the fact that they don't want to get sick and potentially die. You have a young NFL coach who maybe doesn't have a large family, or maybe does have a big family, and they make a family decision not to play the NFL season. That's going to happen. You see that in basketball. That's going to happen in the NBA. I mean, in the NFL, because I'm talking about the NFL right now. So there's a bunch of storylines we have developing here, right? Who's going to sit out the season? Who's not going to play? Or, who's gonna be the front runner, right? Who's gonna surface as the team to beat? How many games is it gonna take in the season if they play it? How many games is it gonna take for us to see who's on top, right? The first 4 weeks of the season, I would never bet on one game. I'm not a gambling person for sports anyway, but if you're a gambling person, I would not gamble on football this year. If you can avoid it, if you're addicted of gambling, then you need to go seek help. But I would stay away from football this year. It's way too up in the air. It's way too all over the place, right? And if we look at that and we say to ourselves, the consistency is what betting, how people actually, there's some people that are professional sports bettors, that's how they make money, the consistency. There's a predictability about sports, and I'll give you one example, right? A really good team in the NBA, I'm going to talk about the NBA, even though this is NFL, but this is a very clear one, right? So in the NBA, a team that is dominant, like say the Lakers, right? When they go on a road game, on a series of road games, they usually play like a whole series of them, right? So they'll do like 5 or 6 games at home, 5 or 6 games away. The last road game of the series, if it's a back-to-back, it's almost guaranteed they're going to lose, right? That's just the way it works, right? And when you look at the NBA, it's the 5th game of a back-to-back, and it's like, what's going to happen, right? So it's like you have all that weird kind of scenario. So it's like, so betting people, they understand this and they know this, and that's how they bet accordingly. Essentially what I'm trying to get at here. And so when you look at the NFL and you look at, what is an effective bet, or how can you bet safely and, not lose your shorts every single time, you start looking at those little anomalies, right? You look at like, in football, because there's not as many games played, but it's like, if you have 5 or 6 people hurt on defense, starting defensive players, even second string players, right? If you have a lot of injuries on defense, whether it's a starting or the second string, you're going to have a diluted pool of people to rotate in and out. And if you have a team that is rotation heavy, in other words, some people, the way they manage their staff, some coaches, they rotate their people out at certain times, right? There's a rotate interval, right? And people keep track of that. If you're a coach that likes to keep your starters in as long as possible, your second string people aren't going to be as crucial, right? And so you have those type of coaches, and you look at all that, and you look at, and betting people know about this situation. So then if you know that you get 4 or 5 injuries on the defense, and you know that the coach rotates a lot of his players in and out to keep them fresh, then that's going to get hurt. That the personnel that's filling those gaps of the injuries is going to be diluted, right? Instead of you playing at 90% efficiency, you're at 85, 84. So then a good offense, a good, well-coached team like the New England Patriots, they recognize that, they take advantage of that, and that's why it seems like they can beat everybody, because they understand the dynamics of how to rotate your team in and out. Now, if you want to be really crafty, you quantify that time and you change it up, right? So people can't get a beat on you. So what happens is you figure out how often you're rotating your players. You have to quantify that some way. And if people are picking up on that, then you have to change that up, and you have to make that variable, so that way it can't be something that can key in on you as a team, and that way you can be effective, right? You can still keep people guessing. The name of the game for NFL football is keep people guessing. Keep people guessing. If you could keep people guessing, then you could be effective 100% of the time. And so that being said, that's where you have, right? So the NFL, all these variables are up in the air. It's going to be very interesting to see I think if they play a 16-game season, I can see them cutting their season down to 10 games. Having 2 rounds of playoffs, go straight to the Super Bowl. The season's done. It's a wash. Everything, 2020 for sports was a complete disaster. I mean, it was ridiculous. But anyways, getting back to football, right? I first talked about the UFC and their crazy stuff that's going on. Then I talked about the NFL. Is the season going to happen? I think that college football, if they don't have a season, it's going to really put back the NFL in the future. This whole Cam Newton signing with the New England Patriots, he was basically a career. I want to say it's his 10th year in the league. I don't know exactly right off the bat. I'm out and about in the town, but I want to say he's got 10 years in. And so that being said, he's a spicy veteran, man. Cam Newton is the real deal. That guy led a team to 15-1. Super high efficient. This guy's 6'5", like 260. This guy's like a giant person. A giant man playing quarterback. Very charismatic. Very capable. I'm excited to see what he does in that New England system. I have a feeling that he's going to explode. I have a feeling that he might do so well that New England won't be able to afford him. However, if he wins the Super Bowl, he ain't going anywhere. New England's going to sign him to some long-term deal, like the whole deal with Tom Brady, and he could be there another 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, it could resurge. It could revive his career. He was kind of getting stale in Carolina. They were looking for something new anyway over there. And so they were looking to get away from, they were looking to move on for him. He had his opportunity. The window closed and he moved on, right? And Cam Newton's made a ton of money. It's not like he's had the baby contracts and everything. So, he can do it. He's, like I said, he's a very interesting player, and I think that's the best move of the offseason. New England did it again. That was unexpected. Obviously, the people in the know, they kind of saw what was going on. But Cam Newton's very capable. I like that. I like that choice. And New England is, their organizations ran so well. It's ridiculous. It's very hard to beat a team that has an organization that is ran very effectively. I mean, you look at what they're doing. When you pick up somebody like Cam Newton, you're in a position now where, you can win a Super Bowl. They have the personnel. Tom Brady was like 42 years old, and they could have still won a Super Bowl. They were still in the mix. You get a person that's got 10 years younger legs. I mean, geez, dude. And I guarantee you that he's going to be open-eared and ready to just soak it all in. So I think there's going to be that there too, right? So that being said, the NFL has a bunch of mystery, but I like the season. I hope it happens. I hope it happens, and I hope that people... And so I hope the season happens, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't, right? Nobody's going to not be a football fan if it doesn't happen. I think football has the most loyal fans in American sports, period, right? I think if any of the sports cancel the season, I think the football is going to be, they're going to be the safest, right? Basketball too, even, you know what, I think all of the professional sports, if they don't have a season, like if baseball doesn't come back or whatever it comes back to, I think that this worry that like, oh, what's going to happen next year? What's going to happen is people are going to be eager to watch it. Everybody's kind of going through this whole thing at some degree, in the same fashion, the same manner. So everybody's missing out on entertainment, concerts, comedy shows, live performances. All that stuff has been in the dumps for a while. So we're starting to be conditioned to not being able to go see this stuff. So I don't know how much of it hurts. It's a little bit of a bummer, but for the most part, the NFL, basically when all this stuff kind of happened, their season just ended. Basically, their season just ended. So this whole off season, but now we're 2 months away. We're 2 months away from basically the season starting, and we'll see if it actually happens. But anyways, this was all about sports. Tomorrow's podcast will probably be just audio format. I'm going to kind of stagger them and flip them around back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We went for 30 minutes. If you like sports, then listen to it. If you don't, listen to it. If you think, Ruben, this stinks, listen to it. give it a like, a follow, whatever it is. If you're bored at work, if you're delivering Amazon packages, if you're doing Uber and you just want to put something in your ear, then do all that. Listen to, I don't care. It's okay. If you don't want to listen to it, don't. I'm going to splice this up. I'm going to try something different. You're going to see the whole podcast on YouTube. You're going to see it cut in pieces. You know, the NFL part and the UFC part. That's why I kind of did segments. And then I'm going to try to do the same thing when I post this on Facebook. I'm going to alternate. I'm going to go back and forth, right? It's going to be basically the idea behind it. If you've listened this far, then you're going to hear all this stuff, right? But if you didn't and you tuned out, then that's okay. Like, subscribe. Bell notifications on. All that good stuff. Like, there's a popular YouTuber says, if you don't, I'm going to delete all your accounts. You know, come on, I'm not doing all that. But anyways. So, this is July 2nd. Tell me what you guys think about the podcast. I'd really like to hear your feedback. You know, I enjoy doing them. You know, I like talking about the topics I like talking about. If you have a suggestion, you hit me up in the comments, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or on all the podcasting channels. If you want to put a comment on there and say, Ruben, why don't you, Ruben, we don't want to talk about the Cowboys, Ruben, talk about the Rams, talk about this and that. I'll do it. I'll research it, and I'll figure it out. That being said, it's what I want to talk about. If you want to talk about what you want to talk about, make your own show. Just kidding. Anyway, talk to you guys later. Bye.